Well, when he said, "You look just like us," that's when I broke down because I've never in my life looked like anybody.
Hello, you are listening to NPE Stories. This is a podcast where NPEs can share their story. I am your host, Lily, and I found out I was an NPE through an ancestry DNA test that changed my life forever. NPE is a term that stands for Not Parent Expected or Non-Paternal Event. This means that one or more of our parents are not who we believe them to be. NPE Stories is a podcast where NPEs can share their story of what their original family was like, how they found out they were an NPE, and what their journey has been like since the day they found out. Welcome to episode 16, where today I am talking to Lorna. Hi, Lorna.
How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Good.
This is Black Friday. I'm talking to you.
Right.
So thank you for setting time aside to record this today.
No problem.
And I have not heard your story yet, but I believe you're aware of the format of how you can share your story with us.
Right.
So if you're ready, why don't you go ahead and bring us to the beginning and let us know what your original family was like in your childhood.
Okay. Thanks for having me. My childhood was really pretty idyllic, if you will. Was raised with a mom and dad who really cared for me and were really loving. I was the oldest child, and three other siblings, and we were not well off by any means. In fact, looking back on it, you didn't really know that you were maybe more on the poor side than you were, but we were, we always were fed and clothed. It was a matter of having a garden and maybe mom would sew the clothes and things like that, but we had plenty. So I felt like I had a very pretty normal, basic childhood. The only thing that was strange about my childhood, which I'm sure you've heard this, is that when we were all together, I was always looked at, and people from outside of the family would always say, "Well, where did you come from?" Because all my sisters and family members were fair-headed and bigger boned and just totally looked different than me. I was a very petite, dark-haired, dark eyes, dark-skinned little girl. So I always got the milkman's daughter line, which I'm sure is pretty standard among us NPEs from what I understand. But I was always told by my mother that it was because I looked like her side of the family. And my mother brought us back from her hometown when my father got out of the Air Force. They moved back to his hometown. And so I didn't really have a lot of interaction with my mother's side of the family. And there was a lot of secrecy, kind of. Nobody really talked about her upbringing or her, grandparents or any parents or anything like that. So I didn't have pictures, nothing to look at. And my mom did have dark hair, but she was not dark skinned. So I always just kind of bought the whole story of that, I was from my mom's side of the family and they all look like, and that does happen. That's pretty normal that you could have a child that looks different than the others. Mm-hmm. So I just was completely, oblivious. And I would always say, "Oh, I look like my mom's side of the family." And that was the end of that.
Yeah.
After, into my young adulthood, I guess it was. And then I met my husband that I'm married to, 40 years tomorrow, by the way. Yeah.
Congratulations, by the way.
Thank you.
Wow.
So yeah, when I met him, one of the very first things he said was, one of these things is not like the other. This is the basic, why do you not look like your family? And I gave him the standard line of, I look like my mom's side of the family. And he just looked at me kind of, okay, whatever, you're going to believe that, but okay. And we just let it go. Mm-hmm. And so fast forwarding, of course, to when DNA became affordable and available. One day we were in our office. We own a business together. Have run the business together for a long, long, long time. and we were in the office, and he just said, half jokingly, why don't we get that DNA done? Let's get our DNA done and just see who we are, because he was always told he had a lot of Native American in him, and he actually, since we were from the South, jokingly, but and not in a hurtful way, but jokingly kind of said, in the South there was a lot of slavery that was, people intermingled with, for want of a better way to say it. So, you might be some part African American. And I was like, oh, wow, that would be interesting to see,
Mhm.
because I'm curious or whatever. And wouldn't have bothered me a bit, of course. And he so said, let's do it. So I was like, all right. So we send off for the kits. We're in the office and we do the little, vials of saliva or whatever, and we send it off to ancestry.com. And about 2, 3 weeks later, he gets his results, and his are, pretty much Heinz 57 variety mutt. He's just a little mix of everything. Strangely enough, no Native American, even though if you could see him, you would just swear there's some Native American blood. So I don't know, as they, the results kind of, we've been getting changes in our results, whereas the DNA industry, I guess, gets better and better at doing this. They're able to break down more and more regions, even of your DNA. So it has changed and evolved, but he doesn't really pay attention to all that. I, of course, with my story, I'm just totally obsessed with every little thing they send me, but he doesn't even really look. So anyway, he got his back pretty normal, and mine didn't come back for another week or so. So then about a week later, I get mine, and I look at it, and I just kind of think that's really strange, because it came back 44% Greek. And I was like, wow, I didn't know my mom was Greek, because her last name was totally Irish. And again, like I said, dark hair, whatever. And so it still didn't alarm me, but I thought it was really strange, because I was like, wow, that's a lot of Greek. And so my sister happened to be working with me. She still does work for me. And so I called her into the office, and I'm like, hey, I need you to do your DNA. And she was like, okay, whatever. And so we sent hers off. And then when hers came back, um, of course, the first thing I was looking for was ethnicity, and there was absolutely no Greek.
Mm.
And I was, you kind of go through a whole range of things, and one of them is denial. That's just not a river in Egypt. You really do think that, wow, this has got, I'm going to explain this somehow. But then I got to where I could see relationships, who was I related to in that whole scheme of things. But I still didn't I still didn't know. So I went to my mom, who is living, and I just said, "Mom, I need to get your DNA." And she's like, "Why?" And she said, "I said because I'm Greek." And I guess by this time I'm a little suspicious. So she's like, "Well, I don't know what you're talking about." And I said, "Well, I've just did my DNA, and it says I'm half Greek, so you have to be half Greek because my sister Devin is not." And she says, well, what if I'm not? And I said, well, if you're not, then we need to talk, because I'm half Greek. And so I don't know why she did, but she agreed to do the DNA, which is hilarious to me. But I guess, she had pushed it away for so long and had told the story for so many years that she just wasn't ready to. I think she kind of blocked it all and just wasn't ready to talk about it. So we send off her DNA. And of course, it comes back none, no Greek at all. And I said, well, Mom, I love you. It doesn't matter from between you and I, but I do deserve to know the truth about my, ancestry. And by this time, I was looking at my sisters and then my mother and then me on the ancestry.com site. And then I could see where it said half sibling to my sister.
Oh.
And that was when I really, really knew that, my dad wasn't my dad.
Mm.
Um, and um, so my mom denied everything. And of course, the first words out of her mouth were, well, I didn't, you know, mess around or screw around or whatever the wording. I don't remember exactly the words, but I knew the minute she said it that she did because, usually whatever is in your mind is kind of what kind of pops out. And she said it, and I thought, yeah, okay, well, I've got some Greek somewhere. So I just let it go. I dropped it for a little while and thought,
Lorna, are your parents, were they still together? Did they stay together?
okay, so my mother and my dad that raised me, my dad had passed away about 4 years before. But they had divorced, and that's another strange thing was when all of this finally came out, and she does finally confess. My dad had passed away 4 years before, but even funnier than that is they had divorced like 20 years before. So
Hmm.
why, I see at different junctures where she could have said, there's something I need to share with you, but I asked her, I said, Dad, when you and Dad divorced, wouldn't that have been a good time to maybe share this with me? And she said, it just never occurred to me. It just never occurred to me. And so I just, I said, okay, so let it drop or whatever. And then later on, I said, when Dad passed away, don't you think that would have been a good time to share with me? I mean, I kept, just asking her, what was she thinking? What was she thinking? And she said, it just never occurred. It just never occurred to me. And I mean, I really sincerely, with the look on her face when she said it, I really believe that. I really believe that it just never occurred to her that I wasn't his
Hmm.
because she had been 19 years old and this she's 80, so that's a long time
Hmm.
to squash something, I guess.
Yeah.
So yeah, thankfully, I say thankfully, my birth certificate father, the guy that raised me, my dad, I call my dad, was passed. And I know now that he knew, because he actually worked with my sister, who was a little younger than me, and they worked together. And one day after work, I guess they went and had a cocktail or two, and maybe he had loosened up a little bit, and he shared a story with her, and he said that he was in the Air Force, and when he came back from Korea, and then he brought me and my mom back to Kentucky. That he said his family looked at me and said, "That ain't your baby," basically.
Oh.
And he said, "Yes, she is, and I don't want to hear another word about it." And then he immediately said to my sister, "Please don't ever share that with Lorna. Please don't tell her that." So I think that was his way of subliminally maybe planting that seed so that hopefully someday I would know the truth.
Uh-huh.
Um, and and she and that sister was the only one that when I went to them and said, "Holy cow, what is this? I'm Greek," she was the only one that said, "Why do you want to know? What does it matter?" And she was very defensive. And now I know that it was because she was trying to honor my dad's wish that she keep that secret.
Okay.
So she
Yes.
didn't want me to know. And I see that because and I immediately could tell that she knew something, you know what I mean? And so she did finally tell me that story. And I think that he would have wanted her to tell it
Hmm.
to me.
Are you the oldest of your siblings?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, yes. Um, and I think that, and it's so funny because they're all, I mean, so supportive and really good about it. They were a little bit weirded out at first and maybe even a little bit jealous, you know what I mean? Because they're like, okay, who are, because they didn't want to share me, I guess. I don't know. But they also just didn't want me to be hurt. And
Mhm.
that was the main thing, was like, we don't want you, because I was digging for information. My mom wouldn't tell me anything. I had no name. I had no birth records, nothing. And I just refused to give up. Um, I had someone tell me that when I'm determined to do something, I'm like a dog after a meat wagon. I'm just not going to give it up. And so I was digging and digging. And so finally, I think my husband felt so bad about it. He said, "Why don't you hire them to help you?" So I hired Ancestry.com, and they had a whole team of people working on, to find my birth family.
Oh, I
And
didn't realize that they did that. You can do that through
yeah,
Ancestry.
yes, 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 you can. It's not the cheapest in the world, but they were very. I mean, They worked with me for 9 months, and they were very, very thorough, and they did, and they even said, they would say to me, if if we feel like we're at a dead end, we're going to stop, and we're not going to spend your money, unnecessarily. So when they looked at the information that they had at that point, when I very first found it all out, they said, "Well, we can tell that you're Greek, of course, that you're," and I don't know how they knew this, but they immediately knew that I was from the island of Crete, and they knew that I was either a first or second generation American. That either yeah, first or second generation. Either my father had immigrated over or his parents had immigrated over. But they said, other than that, there really wasn't any way of knowing, because Crete is an island, and there was lots of intermarrying and people, among the island and all of that. So they said, basically, what we want you to do is upload your DNA to every site available. And we're going to just have to wait, and we're going to look for that needle in a haystack. We're going to try to find that person that's going to match with you, that's going to be a close match. So that's what I did. I uploaded on every site that there is. And then we waited about 7 months passed, not anything happened, and I pretty much had given up. And my poor husband, trying to be supportive, "You're going to find them. You're going to find them. You have a whole family out there. What if you have brothers and sisters?" And I'm like, "I'm not. This is all a waste of time. It's not going to happen. And so he was trying to be upbeat about it. Um, I just wanted a name. I just wanted to know what would have my name have been. Basically, is what I was really wanting to know
Mhm.
at this point. And because I think the day that I just have to say that the day that I found out, it was like a big hole just opened up underneath my feet, and half of me got sucked down into that black hole.
Yes.
And it wasn't that I'd lost my dad, because I didn't, but I lost who I was, if that makes sense.
Yes, it does.
Um, so yeah. So anyway, about 7 months goes by, and all of a sudden I get a close match, and it's a gentleman, and he is supposedly a first cousin, of course, which is very close. And so the team calls me, and they said, "Oh, we have a match. This is your first cousin." And they said his father's name was Castronakis, which is very Greek. So I was pretty excited about that. I thought it was cool. But they said, "But we don't know any more than that. We don't know who your father is yet. We know this is not your father. His father is not your father. So, but we have a name." So we're getting closer. So a couple months goes by, and then I get um, a close match from 23andMe. And it's another, it says first cousin slash whatever, close relative. And it was a young lady. And so I sent her a message, and I told her the story, because by this time, almost a year has passed. My mother has confessed. She confessed by text. Can you believe it?
Mm.
She said, she told me she couldn't remember his name. She didn't know what his last name was. She gave me a wrong last name. She gave me a really weird Greek sounding, but it wasn't the right name. And then she just told me that she remembered where he was stationed at what Air Force base, and just very, very vague, not much information. So anyway, the girl that matched with, I just sent a message to and said, told her who I was and that I wasn't looking for anything, that she could look me up on Facebook or Instagram, that I was a very successful person in my own right, didn't want anything, didn't need anything, just was looking for who I was, and that I had this name, and that I knew where my birth father was stationed in 1955. And if she had any information about this family name, would she mind to share it with me? So 2 or 3 days goes by, and I get a message back from her, and she says, Lorna, she tells me her name, and she says, I think that I have the answers that you're looking for. She said, my married name is this, and but my birth name was Castronakis. And she said, my father's here, and he'd like to talk with you if we could have your phone number. And of course, I'm freaking out because I still don't know how she's really related to me. And I don't know who this father is. I don't know if this is my father, her father, my uncle, my brother. I don't know who this is. I don't know who these people are, but I was really, excited to get someone that close match. So of course I gave her my phone number right away. And in about 20 minutes, I get a phone call. And as it happened to be, it was about 2 hours from here, and is where they live. And he says, Lorna, this is Michael, and I'm pretty sure I'm your brother. And he said, we've, of course, I didn't know what to say. I was
Mhm.
like, oh my God, this is just really crazy. And he said, it's taken us a few days because we've not, this was a shock to us. We didn't know. And I get that. I had been looking, they hadn't. And he said, but I went to our father is how he said it. I went to our father and I went, he's alive? He said,
Whoa.
oh. He said, yes, he's still alive. He's very ill. He's not in good health, but he's alive. And I just asked him, about the possibility of could he have fathered a child in 1955, or whatever. And his answer was, well, there was a lot of pretty girls back then. And he said, I knew at that very moment you were my sister. He
Wow.
said, you look just like us. Well, when he said you look just like us, that's when I broke down because I've never in my life looked like anybody. So that was pretty crazy. And I was like, really? And he said, yes, I'm going to send you pictures. He said, you look so much like us. It's not even, you just won't believe it.
Wow.
And we both were crying, and and he was pretty upset because he didn't know what to do about his dad, and he doesn't know what to do about his mom because his mom is still alive too, and she has no idea about me. And so I'm basically kind of the elephant in the room for them. My whole family knows. In fact, their whole family knows. They've told their kids. I've met nephews and everyone, and the only person that really doesn't talk about it is my dad and his wife. they they keep it from them. My
Mhm.
dad has even asked when my birthday was. I know he knows about me because my mom says she told him she was pregnant, but she was married to another man, and he was 19 and my mom was 19, and she barely knew my dad that raised me. They got married, and a month later he left for Korea, and this all happened while he was gone. And then my birth father was getting ready to leave for Korea. Um, Fraternizing with a married woman would have been dishonorably discharged from the service, and Greeks were expected to marry Greeks, just like blacks were expected to marry blacks, and whites were expected to marry whites back then. I mean, it wasn't done. So there was a whole lot of cultural things happening, that just didn't make things possible. So he told her there was nothing he could do and walked away, basically.
Oh, Okay.
I mean, he
This
couldn't.
was after he found out.
Yes, yes.
Okay.
I mean, and then there was no DNA test available. He didn't know my mom that well. They had just had a short little fling, I mean, it was one of those, few weeks, I'm sure, not much more than that. And so, there was no proof, and it would have put him in a precarious situation, I guess. And so my mom just said I was just determined to do whatever I needed to do because she had already lost a baby, and she was just determined to have me. And so when my birth certificate father comes home, which I think is hilarious now when I think about it, I'm sure she just jumped on him like a, like we got to get pregnant or whatever. And then, oh, look, I'm pregnant. And then I'm born 6 months later, quote unquote premature, which I have learned happened a lot back then.
Mm-hmm.
So I was a little bit small. I only weighed 4 pounds and something. So I was probably a little bit premature, but not a 6 month gestation baby. I would not have survived. In speaking with doctors now, I would have only weighed about 2 pounds and probably wouldn't have survived. But back then, people just didn't know and couldn't give those dates. You didn't know all that stuff back then. So she was able to pull it off, even though my birth certificate family all knew. They never, his parents and he had two sisters, and his parents were wonderful to me. I never knew, and they adored me. And there was only one sister, and she was so mean to me my whole life, and I never knew why she didn't like me. Never understood it. Now I get it. She was horrible to me. But the rest of them really weren't. I mean, everybody else was loving and kind and good, and I just thought, I don't know what's her problem, but now I understand. She was afraid of the family antiques or something.
So was it kind of unspoken then with your dad, with your birth certificate father, that they all suspected, they all knew, but it just wasn't talked about?
Yeah, well, my mother said that my dad didn't know. This is what's so funny. They never discussed it. So here I am. I come out, 6 months, whatever. I'm supposedly, premature. And my mother said, "Oh," I said, "Well, do you think Daddy knew?" Now this is, just me talking to Mom. "Oh no, he never knew." And I'm like, "Okay." All you have to do is look at me and you could tell I'm definitely not his. But, he never spoke of it, and they never talked about it. But it was a factor in their marriage because he never trusted her. And I never understood why. But as a child, some of their biggest arguments were about her and her flirtatiousness or her relationship with other men, whether they were innocent or not. My dad was very jealous, and so I think it was part of their biggest issue was that he never trusted her after that. But
Yeah.
as far as I was concerned, as far as the way he treated me, I was my family, my siblings say that I was the favorite one. They say, well, he treated you better because he knew.
Mm.
It
Yeah.
was almost the opposite of what some families get. Some children who are NPEs feel all their lives as if they were second class citizens. And for me, it was almost the opposite. They kind of put me
You
up on a pedestal. It was really strange.
you were very special.
I was special, right? And that doesn't happen a lot of times in this situation. Most of the time, it's the opposite.
Yeah.
Every time you looked at me, every time they looked at me, they knew who I was. There's no way, because when I get those results back and looked in the mirror, I knew immediately. I was like, oh my God, I see.
Mhm.
Why didn't I not see this? I have such Greek characteristics. It's not even. There is no doubt. You know what I mean?
Mm.
So, I even had a friend of mine whose daughter married someone from Cyprus, and he came to America, and she introduced me to him, and he looked at me and he was asked her, well, where's she from? And she said, well, she's from, our hometown or whatever. And he goes, no, where is she from? And she said, I don't know. She's Irish or Scottish or something. And he said, oh, no, she's Greek. And my friend said, no, she's not. And he said,
Mm.
oh, yeah, she is. So we laugh
He
about it now.
Yeah, he recognized your
Mhm.
features as
Oh,
being
yeah,
Greek features.
totally.
Okay.
So every time my dad looked at me, he knew, but he never ever once, you know, let on that he knew or treated me any differently.
Mm.
I mean, I was his first one. I was the boy he never had. We were all girls, so he would take me fishing, and he taught me how to dance, and you know, he,
Mhm.
you know,
He sounds like a wonderful father.
he was a good. He had his moments, but he was a good man. Yeah,
Mhm.
good man. I think he's glad that I know, but I also think he wants me to remember that he's my dad. You know,
Yeah.
I get, I don't know, I get, um, it's going to sound kind of spooky, but but I get signs. And, if I'm really thinking a lot about all of it, he gives me signs that he's there. He wants me to know
Mhm.
that he's still here for me.
Yeah.
I don't need them. You know what I mean? It's like, you don't need that other family. It's not that he's jealous. I mean, I think he wanted me to find the others, but he's number one.
Mhm. Mhm.
So, and that's cool. Um, I'll probably never meet my birth father. I don't know. Because the siblings that I found, which are all very loving and sweet people, don't get me wrong, they're not wanting to upset their parents in their final years. And we all had dinner one night together, and they were all, I mean, because they're very family oriented. Greek people, that's really huge, family. And so one of the first things they asked me and they were so upset about was that did did their dad know that my mom was married? And I said, I can't answer that. Then they wanted to know, well, I think they were upset that the thought that he abandoned me because they felt like that he should have stepped up, because if he
Yeah.
knew about me.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, he knew about me. He knew about me. But I said, don't be angry at your father. I said he did what he had to do for the times, and I don't hold any ill will towards him at all. Now, if I'd had a bad childhood, maybe differently. I don't know, but I don't have bad feelings towards him at all.
I did have a question about your new half siblings and your birth father. Sounds like they're trying to kind of wrap their head around this and a few questions around, oh well, if their father knew, did he know that your mom was married? Did he How could he have known that he had a child out
Right,
there? That sort of thing.
right.
Have they Do they not have that ability to do they not want to go there with him? Do they not want to ask him those tough questions?
I think yeah, no, I don't think they do.
Yeah.
I think they're afraid to upset him and maybe afraid that they're gonna open a can of worms, so to speak, that maybe with the mom and like will the dad feel like he needs to share it with the mom, and then here's their last few years together kind of, I guess if you want to say sullied, I don't know what the word would be, but kind of complicated with the thought of me, which is kind of funny because I was born 6 years before they ever married, so it wasn't like he was married to her or anything. So, some people that, I talk who are NPEs and I shared the story with, they're all like, you just need to go knock on his door and just need to go meet him. And you're going to be sorry if he passes and you haven't met him. And I mean, I am torn about it, but I don't want to upset them and I don't want to upset
Mhm.
their family. And I want to respect my siblings, and their decision. And that's what I told them. I said, I'll do whatever you want me to do. But I keep
Mhm.
hoping maybe in a way that they'll be. I know my brother at one point said, "I'm going to feel guilty because if he passes away and you don't get to meet him, I'm going to feel guilty about that." He's already told me that. The
Yeah.
others, the sisters, they're more protective over their mother.
Yeah.
So they're more like, well, you had a dad that loved you. That's their rationalization, is that, well, you had a dad that loved you. And I'm like, yeah, I did. And I'm perfectly fine.
Yeah.
So it doesn't really completely, I guess, complete the circle, if you will,
No.
of knowing. But if that's as close as I get, then I'm going to be grateful for what I have, and that there could possibly be um, relationships down the line. If I were to just barge in and do something against their wishes, then they're going to be more apt to cut off ties that would be for future generations to have connections. I would like to see my daughter and their kids be friends or whatever. And I don't want to ruin that just because I have an 84-year-old man that I might get a chance to meet once.
Yeah.
So I know that sounds cold. I don't mean it to be like that because it's not. I think about it almost every day, to be honest with you.
And you don't sound cold. In fact, you sound so considerate, more than I could possibly be as a human. So considerate of all aspects of this, thinking about it through your half siblings and your birth father's wife, and that would be hard to take all that into consideration. You were born years before your birth father ever met his current wife, right?
That's correct. Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
But I,
Um,
like I said, I just feel like I don't think that it's my place to just barge into their world and complicate things for them at their age.
yeah.
And I
And you
don't know.
spoke with him, right? You spoke with him
No,
on the phone one time,
no,
so he
no,
knows you.
no, only my brother.
No. Oh, that was your brother, not your birth
Mhm.
father.
Right,
Okay.
right. No, I've never gotten to speak with my birth father. I have pictures. Um, and that's the hard part is like, I don't know. The holidays are hard. I hate the holidays. Because we're friends. It's really funny. We're friends on Facebook. We're friends on Instagram, but we don't acknowledge each other as relatives. You know what I mean? Like we like each other's pictures and things like that. I'm the elephant in the room, because they can't tell their mom, and so so I'm not out, if you will. And it's it's sad on the holidays when you see all the pictures and they're all together and everybody's having such a good time, and you know it's just that's the hard part, is that you feel left out of things. But then I think, well, but that's crazy because if things had been different, and my daughter and I were just talking about this today, because at first, my daughter, it really kind of messed her up too, because her grandparents are both passed. My dad's passed, and then her dad's passed. And she's really family oriented. And she's like, well, I'd like to meet him someday. And I'm like, well, we just don't have that. We don't have that option. And, but then she said, like I said, if if my dad would have said, well, I don't want to have anything to do with you, you have this other man's baby, then I wouldn't have ever had my other family, and all the blessings that I have from them. So it's like, you just can't go back and try to wish things to be different, because you lose either way. You're going to lose. I would have lost either way. I would have lost one or the other. So there's not a really win-win situation about this for NPEs. NPEs don't have a win. There's not a win. There's a
No,
loss. There's a loss no matter what. And as an NPE, you know what I'm saying.
it's so unfair. It's so
It,
unfair to you.
it's
Yeah.
unfair. It's unfair. But it's also, and maybe learning at an older age. And I'm not sure what your age is, but I am an older person. So I learned at age 60. And so I'm well into my journey, almost 4 years actually. And I think, as you're an older person, is a little more pragmatic and can say it is what it is, maybe a little bit easier than a 30-year-old, maybe, or whatever. I never got mad at anybody, really. I never did the anger stage of grief. And I do tell people, because I do help. Um, we have a Facebook group called DNA NPE Friends, and I am a part of that. And I was when I joined it, there was like 600 people in the group, and now there's about 6,500, and that's in less than 3 years. And
Oh, you were one of the originals.
yeah, I was one of the originals. Yeah, and and I just love Catherine to St. Clair, the founder. She's just wonderful. But I try to tell people that are coming in, that you're, especially the ones that are just finding out, I'm like, you're in a grieving period. And if you don't let yourself grieve, just as if it's a death of who you thought you were. And, and go to grief counseling if you need to. It's a, you're going to have to grieve. And so when I say that, all the stages of grief that there are, the one, for some reason, the one I did not ever have was anger. I don't know why. And maybe that's going to come someday. I don't know. The sadness, definitely. The shock, the denial, all of that. I mean, all of those. And they still come and go. The sad days still come sometimes. But never the anger yet. I don't know why. But some people, and I tell people, go ahead and feel those feelings, and let yourself have those days, because you have to get through it. That's the only way to get through it. If you don't feel it, you're stuck in it. If
Yeah.
you deny yourself that feeling, you're stuck. And it's okay. It's okay to cry all day. I have people to say, I just cried all the way to work today, or um, one of my hardest days was on the 5th anniversary of my dad's passing, because that was the day. He had been sick for a while, and I don't know, he was kind of grouchy, and we even had words. My last words with him weren't really nice. I mean, we were mad. I was mad at him because I didn't think he was trying to get well, and I didn't know that he was as sick as he was, and nobody did. And we kind of had him in rehab, trying to get him to where he would do, but he was stubborn. But I also know now that he was really sicker than what we knew, and he was tired, and so on the 5th anniversary of his passing, I just kind of wished that I could have told him thank you, thank you for raising somebody else's child, and loving me like he did, because I know he did. And that was a tough day for me, and that was way long past after I'd learned. And I hadn't really had that sadness, until then. So it's kind of minutes like that hit you, you know.
Where you just feel all those emotions
Yeah,
again.
yeah.
Yeah.
I wish I could have told him thank you. And I wish I had not been mad at him and then him pass. So now my mom's in a nursing home. And so I tell my siblings all the time, I am not leaving her room ever mad at her. I don't care what she says, what she does. I don't care how frustrated I am with her. I'm going to tell her I love her and I'm not mad at her, because I'm not going to do that twice, Not going to
Hmm.
let that happen again. So,
Yeah, and that's important to you.
yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, that's sweet.
Yeah. It's hard, because you want them to do what you want them to do, and they don't always do it. So it's tough.
Lorna, thank you so much for sharing all of this today.
Well, thank you for having me. I just hope that I can. My thing now is, if I can help somebody else understand, um, not only other NPEs, but people outside of that circle, understand really what it feels like from the inside out, because you know a lot of people really kind of dismiss you and say, well, you had a dad, you know and my story is the best story, really, because
Yeah.
I came out with two families. Now I have a whole family over here and a whole family over there, whereas some people are ending up with no families. They're being rejected by their birth certificate families, and they're being rejected by their birth families, and they have nobody. And that's really truly happening. So I'm so blessed. I'm so grateful for my story being as good as it is. But there's some that aren't, and people that are outside of this whole phenomenon, I guess, if you will. They need to be really compassionate with a friend, who finds this out, and not be flippant about it, and to try to make them understand that they that it's okay for them to be grieving for who they thought they were. For they're not who they were. It's important for them to be supportive and not dismissive about it.
Yeah, it sounds like you have a lot of understanding for the different emotions and the different places that people can be along their
Yes,
path.
yes,
Yeah.
yeah.
And I'm sorry that this kept dinging when I
Oh,
was
don't worry
talking to
about it.
you.
Don't
I
worry
think
about
my son needs to be picked up.
it. Bless his heart.
Su- you have such great things to say, and I'm just sorry if that bothered you or anyone else
No, it
during
didn't
the
bother me.
recording. If people wanted to reach out to you or
Mhm.
learn more about you, how would they find you?
lwliteral@gmail.com.
How do you spell your last name?
Littrell.
Thank you.
Mhm.
Well, thank you so much for sharing today.
No, you're welcome. Thanks for having me.
Thanks again to Lorna for sharing today. These stories are here for us to identify with. If you are an NPE that would like to share your story, email npestories@gmail.com. You do not have to give any identifying information. If you are an NPE and would like to share your story, I'd like to hear from you. Subscribe to this podcast to hear more. Come heal with us.